Hello and welcome to Curated Spaces, the community for curious travellers and slow living spaces. I'm Molly Cooper and this is the podcast that's all about getting you off your phone and out there getting the good times rolling. Join me as I sit down with the founders and owners of boutique spaces to share their journeys as well as the inside scoop from brilliant people doing cool things in travel, design and hospitality. We just launched the brand new Curated Spaces platform, so if under the radar finds and exploring the best that the UK has to offer is a bit of you, then go and check it out and start planning your next staycation now. But I think that's quite enough shameless plugging for one episode, so let's go straight into today's conversation. In today's Snapshot episode, we're diving into one of the biggest focuses in the design world right now, the rise of creating spaces and homes that bring wellness into the everyday through natural materials and a connection with the outdoor world. And here to tell me all about it is Cate St Hill, a stylist and writer who has recently completed a home renovation project and is known for her Scandinavian-inspired aesthetic. Cate, it's such a pleasure to be here with you today. How are you doing?
Very well, very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, no, thank you for having me in your gorgeous home. We're looking around at shades of beige, those beautiful leaves. I mean, I wish listeners you could see and I'll share some pictures, but it's such a special space you've created here.
Yes, you'd never know it's really in London. It feels very calm. We've got a beautiful green backdrop outside. And yeah, I feel like I've sort of escaped the world when I come through the front door, leave all the hustle and bustle behind and find my bit of zen.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking around, I feel like I could be in sort of a Swedish summer house cabin looking over a fjord or something. It is so calm. And we're just minutes from Brixton, really, which is such a hustle and bustle place, like you said, but it's so calm and lovely here. So yeah, a little bit of magic you've spread on this renovation of yours, which I can't wait to hear all about. But first, I'd love to hear a bit about your background and what you've been up to.
So I studied architecture, but I never became an architect. I used to think that was sort of one of my biggest failures in life, but actually you kind of somehow find your way to what you're meant to be doing. And now I split my time between content creation for brands, interior sourcing and styling for clients, and writing as well. And I really have this passion for simple living and well-being in the home. And I really think of the home as a sanctuary, somewhere where you can escape, where you can find comfort and refuge, especially when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed with the world. So yeah, it was a bit of a varied path, which brought me through design journalism as well. So I was writing about design for an architecture magazine called Blueprint. And then I set up my blog about 12 years ago. I think it was quite a long time ago. Yeah, exactly. Before Instagram was even a thing, because I knew that I wanted a space of my own where I could write about whatever I wanted. And now I sort of juggle all things and do a bit of everything.
Yeah, I love it. What cool projects and what a fun little CV you have there. And there was something you touched on there, this idea of like a sanctuary in the home, and that just really spoke to me. I don't know if it's just because we've had such crazy years recently, obviously COVID, everyone was locked up, and then we've had cost of living and just all, you know, just feels like there's never a normal year anymore. And people have started to really look at their homes as spaces to retreat to in what is quite a hectic world these days. I don't know how you found that in your own life and how that sort of shaped your renovation.
Yes, I think we spend something like 90% of our time indoors now. Like a huge amount of our time is spent indoors, and it's probably in front of screens or under artificial light and away from all the things which really make us feel good. Movement, moving our bodies, being surrounded by nature, being in natural light. And when I was working in an architecture practice, so I worked for a couple of years in an architecture practice before doing a master's in architectural history and moving into journalism, I really felt there was a disconnect between the buildings and the architecture we were creating and the users who were using them. And then through my own journey of working out that architecture wasn't quite for me, I had quite an intense period of anxiety and panic attacks and agoraphobia, and I really began to understand the impact of our surroundings on how we feel and on our mental health. And I started to get so interested in interior psychology and all the studies and research which really show how if we bring nature into our homes, we can have reduced stress levels, we can feel happier, we can be more productive. So I really want to help people create spaces not just to survive in, but to thrive in, because homes aren't just a roof over our head if we're lucky, but they should be somewhere where we can find calm, comfort, connection, and a sense of meaning as well.
You're right, we spend so much of our lives inside. Like even walking here today, there's a little bit of sun out there on this sort of early March day, and just feeling that on your face, you feel so lifted instantly. And looking down the house now, I can see there's this incredible light coming from both sides. You have your neighbour's jungle down the back, and it feels incredibly uplifting, and I just love what you've done. So I'd love to hear about how you kind of approach this renovation, or how you sort of approach designing for the senses.
Well, I think a lot of it is actually common sense when we think about it. Like when you say we walk through a forest and we feel really good, or we walk by the beach, or we wake up by a green view, we know that nature makes us feel good. But somehow we've kind of forgotten about it, or forgotten how to really harness that power. And now all our urban spaces are, they can be quite disorientating or artificial or synthetic. If you think about shopping centres or urban city centres, they're not really the most conducive to calm. So when you come back to your home, I think you really want it to be this refuge. And it's really about going back to our roots and having this connection with nature. I mean, there's this idea of biophilia, which is literally translates as a love of nature. But it's this idea that we have a predisposition to all natural forms, natural motifs, natural materials. And it's something which connects with us on an innate level. But I really believe in designing for all the senses. I think if you're creating this idea of well-being, which is generally a feeling of comfort, contentment, and good health in the body and mind, you have to design a space not just for your eyes, for your sight, but for all your senses. So touch is really important. Tactility is really important, because touch is one of the first senses we developed even in the womb before we could see. Wow. So I think everything we touch, from when we wake up in the morning and we put our feet down onto the floor and feel grounded, to all the touch points around a space, the light switches, the curve of an arm, which you might feel when you sit down into an armchair. I think all those touch points are really important to consider. And then things like smell can be so evocative of memories or places you've been. So using fragrance to bring that feeling to a space, bring the soul of the space really. And of course, there's taste, which isn't really applicable in an interior space unless you're doing kitchens or something. Sound, creating a tranquil environment which is protected from the harsh sounds you might get outside. I mean, we can become really irritated if we hear a sound, persistent sound. So using fabrics, upholstery, rugs, curtains, even sound insulating panels to create that soothing, calm environment. I've got cork floors here, and the cork is a really good sound insulator, and you can't really hear the chairs scraping against the floor. We're sat at a dining table at the moment, and if you move the dining chairs, you can't really hear the scrape of them on the floor. You can't hear loud noises. If something drops on the cork floor, it just sort of bounces off. So I really think that's a wonder material. And
also,
something.
I have to say, looking down, is this the chicest cork I've ever seen? It's like whitewashed or something. It's gorgeous. It's really lovely.
Yeah, it's none of your 70s sort of really golden orange cork panels. Yeah, it's the chic version.
It's lovely. Okay, maybe I need to get some cork in my flat. You know, I'd be coming away saying that, but there's a design hack for you all listening in.
Yeah, I think cork is seriously making a comeback, so I think you'll probably see a lot more of it. But then there's two other senses which aren't so well talked about. Well, we all know that we have 5 senses, but we also have 2 other ones, which one is vestibular, so that's your balance. So balance helps us with orientation in a space. So if you think about shiny surfaces or patterned tiles, they could feel a bit dizzying. They could have a dizzying effect if you lay the pattern on the floor in the wrong way and then you walk across it and you can't quite tell what's level. And you'd also want to pay attention to uneven surfaces. And then there's proprioception, which is your spatial awareness. So this is the awareness our body has of the movements, positions and actions we need to take. So it's how we can walk up the stairs without really thinking about it, how we can put one foot in front of the other without knowing how to do it, and how we know that we're touching a different surface with, say, our hands or our feet without looking at it. We don't need to look at our feet to know that we're walking across a different surface. So in an interior space, you want to create something which is quite intuitive to use. So you're not even thinking about how you're using it. So paying attention to the space between objects, making it easy to get around things, especially in a kitchen when you're opening cupboards and moving around a space.
I think that's this idea of like flow, which is such like you can't quite put your finger on it, but when I first moved into my flat, I had the sofa on one bit and a table on another bit. And I always knew it wasn't a great setup, but I couldn't quite work out what else we could do. And then actually weirdly, my younger brother, who was like zero interest in interiors, was just like, why is your sofa there? It should just so obviously be over there and your telly there and your table there. And we moved it, 3 pieces of furniture. And I was like, wow. The whole flat has just been unlocked and like just makes so much more sense now. But again, it's that sort of sense of balance, moving around objects, that space. And it was all blocked up and boy, did it make a difference. Yeah,
you don't often know how you need or want to decorate a space until you're living in it and actually using it. And I think it really pays to think about what you'll be doing in the space, how you'll be using it every day, the activities you'll be doing, so that you can create a space which really works for you. That's why I think it's such a personalised experience. And it's also about bringing this emotional quality which connects you on a more meaningful level, so that it doesn't just feel like something you've pulled from a magazine or something you've tried to recreate from a trend, but looking at it and thinking, how does this really connect with me on a personal level, so it becomes an expression of your inner world.
Yeah, which actually, going back to the whole idea of designing for wellness, that's so interesting because wellness is so personal and really differs from person to person. What makes one person feel great might not work for someone else. So actually thinking about like what wellness is to you, what that feels like, what that involves in the day-to-day actions, and then designing for that. That's super interesting. I've never really thought about it like that.
Yeah, through working with clients, I actually see interior design more as therapy for the home, because you're actually trying to get into what really makes them tick. And it's so much more than just adding a few cushions or a vase here and there. It really is a much more introspective process, and my home is very neutral, beige and minimal, but that might not work for someone else at all. They might think this feels quite boring and simple, but for me, when I come home from all the stimulation from outside, the sensory stimulation you get from the traffic in London and the noises and the colours, I want to come back to something which is very serene. And for me, the neutral colours do that, of creating this sort of palette cleansing environment where the everyday life is what brings the character and the interest to me. I don't have lots of clashing patterns or artworks, but it's calming to me, and I think that's what matters, is what works for you.
Oh, I love that. You've almost made like a canvas for life, for things to happen. I can imagine you've had some really gorgeous evenings around this beautiful table we're sat around now. That little verdant candle twinkling there. I can really imagine this space is so special when you just fill it with people that you love and spend good time with them. Yeah,
that's what a home should be, really, a backdrop for everyday life to happen, so that it can facilitate those everyday moments, but also support your mood, how your mood changes throughout the day, the weeks, the months. So it's adaptable, but it also has this sense of openness.
And we were talking just before we sat down to record this, about some studies you've been looking at and sort of this greater effect of nature on wellness, but it maybe in like a slightly bigger institution like hospitals and healing and all that. I'd love to go into that and hear all about what you've discovered there.
Yeah, I really feel that interior spaces not just have the power to make you feel better, but I think they can actually help heal us. So there was an interesting study on natural views, and it was in 1984, and this scientist, Roger Ulrich, was looking at gallbladder patients in Pennsylvania. And he found they recovered quicker when they were faced with green views as opposed to a view of a brick wall. And not only did they recover quicker and have shorter hospital stays, they also needed less painkillers. So it actually helped with their perception of pain. So visual connections with nature, looking at a green view, it reduces our blood pressure, reduces anger and aggression as well, and overall happiness and improved attitude. But it's not just the case for viewing actual nature, it's also viewing artificial nature, so which gives us some hope for small urban spaces if you don't have a green view. If you had a picture of nature or a photo of a landscape or even green cushions, plants, that could still have the same effect and help calm you as an actual view of nature. Yeah. So there is some hope for small urban spaces. And one study in Japan found in particular, I thought this one was really interesting, that if you had 20 minutes looking at a forest, it would calm you back down to a relaxed state after a moment of stress. So you can imagine when you come home from the end of the day, from a really stressful day at work, and you come into your home and open the front door and you have that feeling of calm and serenity, that it would take you back to that relaxed state, and you can rejuvenate yourself, ready to go out and do it again the next day.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because obviously it's go, go, go. You rush from one place to the next. You try and relax, so you like cram in your headspace meditation. Kind of like we've kind of got all these almost a bit like sticking plasters, whereas actually often the real antidote or the solution is so simple, and it is surround yourself in nature or natural objects and like lean into the things that humans have always returned to calm, which is the natural world, which is actually so amazing. We think we're so progressed, but actually just go stare at a tree. Yeah.
Or hug a tree, for
hug
sure.
a tree.
Because our brains and our nervous system are still quite primal. They still feel this familiarity with nature. So you mentioned natural materials, and that's one of a really easy way to bring natural materials and a bit of nature into the home. It's not just with plants and greenery. So with wood or stone or linen, they just feel so much more tactile and warmer than artificial synthetic materials. One study found that wooden spaces reduced blood pressure and created greater feelings of comfort. And there was another one which got participants to touch different materials. So they touched stainless steel, tiles, marble and oak. And the wood actually induced more relaxation and helped calm the nervous system.
That is so cool. And actually, sometimes you walk into a space, especially with this podcast, I've been lucky enough to go around quite a few hotels more than normally. And there's some that you walk into and you just want to like run around and touch everything. And often it is the spaces where they've gone for those really tactile materials, where there's just like little bits of interest wherever you look, and you just literally want to go and like run your hands over everything. Yeah.
I think it's the irregularity and the imperfection in natural materials which really appeals. Like we can kind of almost trust that, and you want to reach out your hand and stroke a nice wooden table, feel the knot of the wood. But if it's some shiny synthetic plastic material, it doesn't quite have that same appeal.
It's like the opposite magpie effect, isn't it? Show me the nice knotty wood, I'm going to go stroke that. Yeah. And apart from things like natural materials and pictures of landscapes and plants, are there any other things that people could play with in terms of design features in their homes, or if they're approaching a project like a renovation?
I think definitely introducing some curves. Ooh. So our homes are naturally quite straight and linear with lots of clean lines, and I think you need some curves to break it all up and make it feel a bit more inviting and welcoming, because you feel like you can move around curves much easier. You feel like you might want to gather at a round dining table, or a circular table might create a little focal point in a cozy corner. And I think again that comes back to nature. You don't see lots of straight lines in nature. Everything is very organic. And I think that is reflected in the big trend of the moment, which is curves. Curves are everywhere. Yeah. Curves are really hot. And I think there's a reason for that. And we're seeing rounded forms, arches, squiggles, scallops, like people are going mad for curves, and I think that really comes back to this natural organic feeling. And again, this has been backed by research into curved spaces versus linear spaces. And curved spaces are typically judged as more beautiful than rectilinear spaces. And scientists actually found that it triggered a part in the visual cortex which is responsible for rewards. So we get this sort of dopamine rush from curved forms or curved furniture, creating a greater sense of relaxation and calm. And the same tendency towards curves has actually been found in apes as well, suggesting that it's something quite primal. If we saw a sharp edge, a rectangle object, a straight line, it might be something which could be seen as quite threatening or harsh if we were in the natural world and we wanted to stay safe.
I so get that. So I've got 2 cats, and you make them lovely, nice bit on the sofa, not interested. You get tiny little rolled up bit of cardboard or like a little nook and cranny, and they are in there. They love that. Any big open straight things, no thank you, but anything like small and tucked away and curved, a den, they love more than anything. And it is that sort of primal instinct to retreat, to hide, to conceal, finding comfort in like small organic shapes. I completely get that.
Yeah, that sort of cocooning effect, the feeling you get when you collapse into a really nice armchair and it really sort of cuddles you.
Yeah.
Or when you get into bed and it feels very cozy. Having those soft edges to contrast the hard and harshness of the clean architectural line. So really having duality between hard and soft, warm and cold, feminine and masculine, creating that sense of balance will create a space that feels very calm and tranquil to be in.
And for anyone who's listening in, as well as those sort of things we just spoke about, but do you have any practical hands-on advice? Obviously you've undertaken this gorgeous renovation. Anything that you would pass on as little tidbits, or maybe that you wish you'd known before you started this project?
I'd like to really emphasise that the design of well-being in the home, or creating spaces like this, shouldn't just be for the rich or well-off, for people who can afford a beautiful extension. I really like to think that design should be accessible for everyone, and that you can create a space which is cosy and calm with a few things without having to do a whole makeover of a space, but really keying into what works for you and how to make that support your everyday. It can be really simple ways of bringing nature into the home, whether with a plant, a window box, just being conscious of how you use the space and what you want from it.
Oh, I love that. What a gorgeous note to end on. And we can all go and buy some cushions for our flats and feel much better about life. Excellent. It's been such a pleasure chatting, Kate. I do, of course, have a quick fire round to wrap up. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so what is one place that you go back to time and time again for inspiration, to lean on for design ideas?
Oh, good question. There's so many places I could suggest. But I'm going to go for something which is the complete opposite of my home, of being all minimalist. So I would say Charleston House, which is the home of the Bloomsbury Group in Sussex. And it was the home of Vanessa Bell and Duncan Grant, 2 artists in the early 20th century. And they really expressed themselves in their surroundings. And the house became a work of art. They would paint on every surface. And it became an expression of freedom, of artistic expression, but also the expression of their personal lives, because they were very outside the box for that age. They were, I think they say they were living in squares, but loving each other in triangles, because they were all sort of mixing together. And I find them so inspiring, and how they created something so unique for them.
I love that. Brilliant answer. And then slightly different, if there's one era in time you could travel back to and like design in that world or sphere or age, do you have any time periods that you would go back to?
Probably the early 20th century or mid-century, when they were really playing with the rules and rejecting the ornamentation, the ostentation of the past, and rejecting authority in a way. And they really delved into the craftsmanship of something. So the Scandinavian designers, for example, they really refined their craft, trying to use as less materials as possible and really refine a chair. So you're sitting on a beautiful wishbone chair, and that is a beautiful example of how exquisite their craftsmanship was at that time.
Yeah, love a wishbone. Yeah, I think I've got some at home, but they're quite cat destroyed by this point, so probably need to get an upgrade.
I can imagine you walking out the door with that chair.
Yeah. Oh, what's that over there, Kate? And then this one's slightly different, but do you have any wellness rituals that you like to do on a day-to-day or just lean into when you need some extra loving?
I think it's creating a sense of mindfulness in everything you do. So even making a cup of tea or a cup of coffee as a break, really focusing your attention on what you're doing, really taking that moment and not rushing through it just so that you can have a cup of tea, but concentrating on yourself, pouring the water. That's quite a Japanese approach, I suppose, really savoring that little moment and taking that throughout the day with you. So when you go for a walk, really noticing the buds on the trees and creating this sense of awe as well with the natural world. And I think the more you open yourself up to those mindful moments or that sense of awe when you really get inspired by nature, then I think that just makes you more aware and more content and more appreciative of what's around you.
I love that. What a gorgeous answer to end on. Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure chatting.
Thank you. It's been amazing. I really enjoyed it.
Good. Oh, Kate, I'm feeling so calmed and inspired by our conversation. Thank you for sharing your gorgeous home with me and for all your pearls of wisdom for creating spaces that soothe and nurture. And thank you, lovely listeners, for tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so hit me up for natter, slide into my DMs or leave a review. It honestly means the world and keeps the podcast going. You can, of course, find all of our lovely spaces and many more in the new Curated Spaces platform. Head to app.curatedSpaces.club to explore the whole collection and start planning your next getaway. And I'll be back very soon with more stories and inside scoops, so I'll catch you then for more Curated Spaces.